tribute to a great teacher, a great mom, a great grandmother, a great great grandmother, and an all-around great woman. First of all, I'm going to have my pastor from my church, Crossroads Church here in Council Bluffs, come up and open us with a word of prayer.
If you could, please stand. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you as our God and our Savior. You're sovereign, you're in control, you're in charge, Father, and we just want to seek you right now. Father, we pray that this event would be led by your Holy Spirit. Father, that you would speak through these men and women. God, just a word in season, God, that you would just give us an awareness, Lord God, for this great country. Lead and guide our dignitaries. Lead and guide our leaders, Father. And we just pray that today that there would be a great awareness, that our eyes would be opened, our minds would be opened. And Father, we pray that you would be all over this. You would lead and guide the steps, the decisions, and everything that's said today would be led by your Holy Spirit. And we thank you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Jeff Jorgensen is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Miss Olivia Overholzer will be leading us with the national anthem.
Thank you, Bill. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And when she gets done, I want you guys to give her a big hand. Her family just got back from Colorado this morning. They drove in the last leg so that she could be here to do this for us.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly gleaming, and the rockets did glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
We have several speakers here today. I don't know if any of you saw the flyers or anything that was out on Facebook about it. This event actually made Fox News last night on their national news. So I had originally intended to have Mayor Walsh start off as our speakers, but since we got started late today, we have a state representative, my state representative, who's got to leave here at 12:30, and we're going to give her an opportunity to speak real quick before the mayor. Are you sure? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Council Bluffs Mayor Matt Walsh.
Thanks, Bill. Good afternoon and welcome to the Louise Sollowin Memorial Scholarship Fundraiser. I think it's important to briefly place some context on the life of Louise. Louise was a mother of 3 children. She had 7 grandchildren, including her granddaughter Teresa Hartzell and Teresa's husband Bill, who live in Council Bluffs. 13 great-grandchildren and 17 great-great-grandchildren. For 71 years, or her entire adult life, Louise lived in the same Omaha home on South 10th Street in the heart of Omaha's Little Italy, where she and husband Joe raised their children. This was the home where generations of her family came to visit her. She attended Mass at St. Francis Cabrini Church and sent her children to All Saints for their education. Louise was an active community member, well known in Little Italy neighborhood by its residents and by the parishioners of St. Francis. Louise loved her family. She loved to cook for her family. And by all accounts, she was an incredible seamstress, making clothes for the family, and in later years, making pajamas for generations of grandchildren. Those pajamas that were made with love provided their wearer the nighttime warmth and security that only a grandmother could provide. She worked in the Orsi family bakery, where she and Sister Frances casually spoke Italian as they fired up the ovens to bake that wonderful Orsi bread. They also, on Saturdays, cooked a special treat for their many customers. It was a pizza that people flocked from both sides of the river for an opportunity to purchase. 30 years ago, her husband Joe passed away, and Louise continued on without him, serving as the strong matriarch of the Sollowin family. Louise retired early at the age of 83 after more than 50 years on the job. Her retirement allowed her to spend more time with family and her church. What made no sense then makes no sense today. She passed into perpetual rest on July 24th, 2013, 1 year ago this week. She was 93 years young and in good health. She certainly had more life to live and more love to give. That remaining life was taken from her by inexplicable evil, a crime so heinous that it's unfathomable for one human being could perpetrate that crime upon another. The memory of those many years in Louise's wonderful life has now become shrouded by the dark memory of that attack. We know that she is in a better place, and may God rest her soul. May He also look over her family members that she has left behind. Their mental burden is exhaustive and constant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Walsh. Next up, we have State Representative Mary Ann Hanusa.
Thank you, Bill, and welcome, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The United States of America is the most compassionate and generous nation in the history of the world. Since our founding, we have welcomed people from our shores to come to this country legally to be citizens along with all of us. I stand here as a granddaughter of a legal immigrant who came to this nation at the turn of the century at 16 years old to study and to better his life. And many of us here have similar stories. Maybe perhaps all of us here have similar stories. But we are also a nation of laws. The laws exist to protect our nation and to give us freedom. We have immigration laws currently on the books that need to be enforced. Not only to protect our nation's security, but also those who seek citizenship lawfully. Our borders should be made secure. We need to follow the law. I am very proud of Iowa's Governor Terry Branstad, who earlier this week echoed the fact that we are a nation of laws which must be upheld. He stated that Iowa does not want to send a signal that we are encouraging those in other countries to come to the United States illegally, and he called for stricter border enforcement. We are a great nation, because of our laws. This is what sets us apart from every other nation in the world. We need to enforce those laws, and we need to make sure that our country is made secure for all of us who are here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Baker from KFAB Radio. And first of all, I just want to say that it's great to see each and every one of you out here. And right now, I would like to introduce you to a gentleman who I've always found to be a solid leader in Washington, D.C., doesn't mince words in any way whatsoever, and a man that I would certainly want to see go back to D.C. after this next election coming up. Will you please welcome Iowa Congressman Steve King.
Thank you, Chris. I want to thank you all for coming out here today. You know, it's easy enough for us to go off and golf or go to the lake or sit around and watch a little TV or do whatever we might do with our families, maybe work in the yard. But we've got a country to save. And we've been at this for some time. And I would just dial this back in my earlier part of my upbringing. I grew up in a law enforcement family. My father was a manager of state police radio stations, and I grew up with law enforcement people around me. And these were city police, county officers, state officers, and sometimes federal officers. There never was any idea that the federal government had some kind of an exclusive lock on enforcing a federal law. If they needed help enforcing the law, we helped all the way down the chain. And if we needed the feds to come in and help us, they came in and helped all the way down the chain and all the way up the chain of law enforcement. And that's because, as this was branded in my little impressionable brain, that the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land, and the laws that are written appropriately under it, you abide by them. And if you don't like those laws, we have a means to change them. And in fact, if you don't like the Constitution, there's a means to amend it. But we are a nation of laws, not of men. And one of the great reasons for this civilization, and I use the term proudly when I say civilization, when I talk about America, one of the great reasons is the rule of law. And I could go through the list of the pillars of American exceptionalism. It's pretty short. Most of it's in the Bill of Rights: freedom of speech, religion, the press, the right to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances, like we're doing here today, exercising several of our constitutional rights that are wrapped up in the First Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms. The property rights that existed in the Fifth Amendment before the Kelo decision, and hopefully one day will exist again. It goes on: no double jeopardy, you face a jury of your peers, a quick and speedy trial. The powers that are not delegated to the federal government go to the states or respectively to the people. This is the foundation of this great country that we are. And we cannot be a great country if we don't have this other pillar of American exceptionalism called the rule of law. Now, you all sent me off to Congress a few years ago, and I found myself on the immigration subcommittee. And there I've sat through, I believe, more hours of testimony there than anybody else that's in Congress today. If you couple that with reading testimony and looking at reports and giving speeches, there isn't any doubt about that in my mind. But they would always bring us a witness for each panel in each hearing, and that witness would be one or sometimes more that would testify as to how many people died in the Arizona desert trying to get into the United States, or actually having got into the United States, trying to penetrate the rest of the way into the United States. And that number, as I watched, went from around 240 a year on up to some number not quite 500 a year. Now, that's appalling to think of those people that have lost their lives in the desert, but that seemed to be the only story. So I began asking the witnesses, can you tell me, you're here as an expert, aren't you? And they would say, well, yes. Well, good. Now you've testified how many people died in the Arizona desert trying to make their way on further into the United States. Tell me, if you will, how many people in America died at the hands who did make it across the border and into the United States? How many? And as I asked that question going down the panel, and panel after panel, it would lock up the witnesses. They weren't ready for that question. They hadn't somehow thought that there's a price that's paid here in America for laws that aren't enforced at our border and in the interior and the domestic enforcement of the United States. And so finally, these witnesses that were not experts, I found one that was. And his name's Mike Cutler. He's a former INS agent. And he didn't know the question was coming. But when I asked him that question, I said, how many Americans died at the hands of who came across the border and were unlawfully present in the United States? And he said, I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you it will be in multiples of the victims of September 11th. Think of that. Multiples of the victims of September 11th. And I've since that time commissioned 2 GAO studies that prove that beyond any doubt. The criminal aliens that are incarcerated in our federal penitentiaries rate between, and depending on which study, between 28 and 30% of the inmates in our federal penitentiaries, criminal aliens. Well, you have to presume they're committing 30% of the crime. They're not there for crossing the border. We don't lock people up for that anymore, do we? We have a president who has essentially said, I'm going to grant administrative amnesty to everybody unless you make me feel uncomfortable politically. That's the analysis. 2 years ago, the president implemented DACA language and the Morton memos. DACA stands for Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals. It actually means deferred action for criminal aliens. And so he has suspended the law. And we've seen these numbers that show that if you can get into America, you have a 98% chance of staying in America. Now that's the numbers. Now if you're part of these that are coming across McAllen in that area, and you're an unaccompanied minor, that number now is 0.1% returned. 0.1% returned. That's it. So when their parents learn here from the coyotes in places like Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, that they can smuggle them into the United States for say $6,000, $7,000, or $8,000. Some of the families already here, they send money back there. They pay the coyote, which is like a real estate agent in their community, who brings a group of them up into the United States. And once they get in the border, what happens? We're not putting them in Tent City. We didn't call Sheriff Arpaio over to McAllen, Texas to build a tent city so we could house these 57,000 unaccompanied minors that have come into the United States. By the way, that's 1/5 of the total population of those that we have apprehended coming into America through that sector, 1/5. So 57,000 times 5, that gets you to the number that we're really talking about. And by the way, we don't interdict any 100% of those that try. The highest number the Border Patrol would testify to is 25%. So if we're stopping 25%, stop them temporarily and then turn them loose, by the way, you still have to multiply that number times 4 to get to the number of attempted crossings. It's well over 1 million attempted crossings each year in a border. We had 11,000 a night at the peak. 11,000 a night. People say, how many is that? 11,000 a night infiltrating across our border. That's right at twice the size of Santa Anna's army. Now it's about exactly the size of Santa Anna's army. And some say it's not an invasion. What would it take for it to be an invasion? If Santa Anna's army came over the border the size of that every single night, and that went on for 10 years, would you consider it to be an invasion? I do. And I consider it to be a destruction of our rule of law. I consider it to be an assault on the pillars of American exceptionalism. And the President of the United States is doing this. Why? I don't know if either any of them are reasons. I can tell you that his vision of America isn't like our vision of America. That we know. Now, I don't assert where he was born. I will just tell you that we are all certain that he was not raised with an American experience. So these things that beat in our hearts when we hear the national anthem and when we say the Pledge of Allegiance doesn't beat the same for him. If you remember, when he was a candidate for president, he was standing at the front of a row of Democrat candidates for president down at Tom Harkin's Steak Fry. The rest of them, when they played the national anthem, had their hand over their heart. But Barack Obama was standing with his arms down his side, dangling beside his sides, while the national anthem was being played. Now, what was that about? Was it an act of defiance? I don't think so. Some thought so. I think it just was that just like if we say bow your heads please, you will bow your heads because you expect a prayer. We grew up in this kind of a culture and environment where when we hear our national anthem, we stop. We take our hats off. We place our hand over our heart and we gaze at the flag with admiration and appreciation for those who have gone before us and what they have done. And now we have our challenge. We have a challenge of an invasion that's pouring people across this border. We have a situation where the president is hiding behind a 2008 law. This 2008 law that says if you're an unaccompanied minor, you can be brought into the United States and handed over to Health and Human Services. It's within 72 hours, shall be or should be within 72 hours of the time that you're apprehended. And now it gives that's for exceptional circumstances. When you have 57,000, it's no longer exceptional. But if they need the law changed, fine. I wrote the law. I wrote the fix to it. I introduced it into the congressional record during a special order, but I did not file it as a bill because I don't want to see a vehicle that'll allow the Senate put their Gang of Eight amnesty bill on that and send it back to us. If we're going to fix the 08 bill, it needs to start in the Senate, and a clean bill needs to get that sent to the president. If we're going to do that. But I'm saying the president doesn't have to have the language changed in order to enforce the law. He's not committed to enforcing the law. And I'm convinced at this point that the president will never secure our border, that there's nothing we can pass in Congress, there's nothing we can do from an appropriations standpoint or a law standpoint that's going to make this president enforce the law. Nothing. Now, we can beat the drum and make noise, and we're doing that. But he's more likely to build the Keystone XL pipeline than he is to secure the border. And he's not going to do that either, you know. So what do? We're going to sit here for 2.5 years and let millions of people pour across our border, load them up on buses and planes and distribute them across the United States, put them in foster homes and put them into every kind of facility we can, and then pay for their well-being and their education and their health care in a country that's got 104.1 million Americans of working age not in the workforce? We can't do that. And the law will never catch up with them. Once they're released, there's no bond. There's no ankle bracelet. There isn't even, in most cases, fingerprints and a picture. Not even an identification check of the people that show up to pick them up. And when we deliver them across the country, and I say the federal government, when I refer to we, these kids might have a slip of paper in their pocket that has an address on it, or a phone number, or a memorized phone number. Oh, that's good enough. We give them transportation to Timbuktu, America, and pull the van up in the driveway or on the curb, open the side of the van up, automatic doors today, you know. We don't even have to get out. They get out and walk into a house. It might be a crack house. It might be a meth house. It might be a human trafficking house. It might be an MS-13 house. They might be MS-13. So who's coming in now? Who's coming in? If you dig deeply enough in there, the federal government will actually tell you. I saw an article in the Guatemala City newspaper about 3.5 weeks ago, and I thought I better dig into that a little further. We found the U.S. website that it didn't refer to it, but the data was off of. Here's what it is. Of these 57,000 unaccompanied minors, this 1/5 of this whole population that have been apprehended on our border, of that, 80% are male. You're seeing pictures of little girls, right? Little girls with their moms. Well, if they're with their mom, they're not an unaccompanied minor. And so where are the boys? There are a few of them in there, I agree. They're 80% male, and that's off of the website that is Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement. 80% male. And of this universe of unaccompanied children, 83% are 15, 16, and 17 years old. So if you do the math and you do 57,000 times 0.8 to get the 80%, 10 times 0.83 to get the 83% that are that upper age, 15, 16, and 17, you will end up with a number above 36,000 of these young men who are prime gang recruitment age, coming from the most violent countries in the world. The 6 most violent countries in the world are south of Mexico. Not Mexico itself, but south of Mexico. And it starts with Honduras, goes to Guatemala, pretty soon El Salvador shows up. So think of this, if you were going to go around the world and recruit a demographic of people who are the most likely to be the most violent and the most consistently recruited into gangs, they were going to be the most costly and painful and bludgeoning element of any society or civilization. There's no place in the world you could go to come up with a worse demographic than what's being brought in. And by the way, Department of Homeland Security and HHS are completing the crime of unlawful entry into the United States by delivering these kids into these households across the country, never to be seen again, not to show up at their hearing, but perhaps to show up before a judge for charges like we saw happen here this last April when that ghastly murdering perpetrator that killed Louise Sollowin was finally sentenced to life in prison across the river in Nebraska. This rips all our hearts out. I see the picture of him back there. It rips our hearts out to know how the Sollowin family has suffered, and to think that the suffering here that's multiplied in this community over and over again, this suffering is one of thousands and thousands of cases across America that we have endured for more than a decade. And still, their hearts are cold. And still, the leadership in this country doesn't listen. The pain for this is great. We're honoring Louise today, and we're launching the scholarship fund to remember her. We're also taking a step and standing up to restore the rule of law. I pledge to commit with you all the way on this, to restore this rule of law. We need to get ourselves a president that will secure the border. We've got a 2.5-year wait before we get one. But as they come in here into Iowa, let's test them. Let's help them put that plank in their platform that says, secure the border, restore the rule of law, restore the respect for the rule of law. That must be done. And since the president's not going to secure the border, it's up to the states to secure the border. And I look at the border states. On Thursday, day before yesterday, I introduced a resolution into the United States Congress that does three things. It sets up three things. It recognizes and identifies that the governors of the states are the supreme commanders of their National Guard. The commanders-in-chief of their National Guard, governors. The second thing is, and that the governors have the authority to call up their National Guard to secure our border. Second thing is, it calls upon the governors to do so, call up the National Guard, secure our national borders. Third thing is, commits the House of Representatives to funding the state National Guard for doing the job that the president won't do. And remember, what we've got going on here is a humanitarian crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis in McAllen. It's a humanitarian crisis across this whole country. It's absolutely a humanitarian crisis to the Sollowin family and the thousands of families that are suffering the same way. But this is also a man-caused disaster. Remember Janet Napolitano when she said man-caused disaster? Well, now we actually have one. But the man that caused it is Barack Obama. And he is not doing his job. He has the authority to call up the National Guard and secure the border. He's got the authority to trigger the construction of the border fence. Neither one of those things are going to happen. I want to see the state governors call up their National Guard, secure the border, and if we can get some momentum going on that, then we'll come in behind that, and let's build a fence, a wall, and a fence, and let's get this thing done once and for all, so that we can secure our border and restore our country and assimilate the people into the American civilization that come here. They're the legal immigrants that we celebrate every day. Thank you all very much for coming out. God bless you all. We stand together.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how many of you are here from in Council Bluffs. I wish that the redistricting hadn't taken place, because prior to it taking place, this was our congressman. And in my opinion, this is one of the greatest congressmen that we have in this country today. He is one of the most honest men that I have ever met, and he is a true patriot, and he is fighting not just for his district in Iowa. He is fighting not just for Iowa, he is fighting for the United States of America. Most congressmen, when they go to Congress nowadays, look at how much they're going to get paid and how much they can make on the back end of their serving in the Congress. When our founding fathers originally set it up, it was to go to Congress for a couple of years, do your service, and then go back and work the farm. Nowadays, congressmen go to Congress and they stay there and they make a career out of it. And like I said, they're concerned about what they get on the back end. This man is not like that. And it brings me to a point that I wanted to make today. None of our speakers here are being paid. Every single person who is speaking here paid their own way to get here. They're paying their own way to get back. And they've taken time out of their schedules to do so. We have a lady here who's going to speak who's from Houston, Texas, who flew up here on her own dime. That's how important she thinks this issue is. We have another one that drove down from the Minneapolis area. That's how important she thinks it is. Her name is Ruthie Hendricks. She broadcasts on radio with the Ruthie Hendricks Show, and she is the leader of Minnesotans Seeking Immigration Reform. Please welcome Ruthie Hendricks.
Hello. I see many familiar faces, some new ones, and I thank all of you for being in attendance today. My name is Ruthie. I am the president and founder of Minnesotans Seeking Immigration Reform and the host of the radio program, The Ruthie Report. There are those here in attendance today that knew Louise, that knew her personally, family members, community members, and friends. But there are also those of us attending today, attending the Louise Sollowin Memorial Scholarship Fundraiser, that have never met Louise, that only became aware of this woman, Louise, due to the tragic, heart-wrenching, sickening, and preventable murder by which she left this world. And although it must be hard, I thank Louise's family and the many other individuals and families who have suffered due to the inaction of our leaders to protect we the people from those who should not be in this country to begin with. I thank every one of these individuals for speaking out, for creating memorials, scholarships, or simply just sharing their ordeals, refusing to remain silent. Those who share their senseless and preventable crimes that has cost them so much. Those who are not willing to let their loved ones go quietly into the night. We must share and speak the truth, as difficult, infuriating, and emotionally disturbing as it is. Why is it that Louise seems to touch so deeply into many of our hearts? Is it because of the horrific crime that she endured? Brutally beaten and raped. Is it because of her age, 93, our elderly, much like it is with our children, our youth? Or is it because the result of this attack resulted in her death? A woman whose family states she was a saint, that she loved her family and her family loved her, who fellow community members say she was a pillar in the neighborhood, and the library as well. A woman, a veteran's widow, who successfully survived so much in her life, only to be taken in this violent and destructive way. And while the pundits in Washington and so many on a federal and state level refuse to address the violence that is taking place due to their pandering and their inactions to enforce our laws, secure our borders, and screen those who are entering our country with hopes of preventing sexual deviants and predators from raping our women and children, they instead facilitate the out-of-control injustice and insanity. Instead of addressing the war on women, such as the violent rape and murder of Louise at the hands of an illegal alien that stated, quote unquote, he was mad at women, they instead push asinine narratives such as the war on women is an abortion pill or birth control related. They ignore the reality, the facts, that the real war on women is our out-of-control, unsafe, open borders immigration policies by allowing the likes of Sergio Perez to enter our nation. Perez, an illegal alien who has confessed to the rape and murder, who now receives 3 meals a day, a warm bed, health care, etc., serving out his life sentence while Louise is permanently gone. Please note those that are here today attending this fundraiser and those who are not. Note those who are standing strong to protect our nation and our women and children. We have obviously failed. We have failed in the past in our selection of representation, installing many who would rather pander than stand strong for the safety, security, and sovereignty of this nation and its citizens. That is a situation that we must now correct. As we gather today to remember Louise and kick off the Memorial Scholarship Foundation, what are we witnessing on our southern border? A border invasion. An invasion completely out of control that is eroding the rule of law and the nation as a whole. Of course, with narratives of heart-tugging terms such as refugees instead of the correct and factual term illegal alien. Missing from this incorrect political push are the stories, cases, rapes, and murders of those already lost. Louise Sollowin, and so many more. And the implications, what's missing is the implications of the future victims yet to come, all due to the inactions of our federal government. Many say and believe that this is an intentional act by what I refer to as epic failure, Obama. A statement I myself believe to be true. If it were not, why is nothing being done to stop it? Instead of a proactive stance of securing the border immediately, sending a non-amnesty, non-lawless message to those entering and enforcing our current laws, we witness a non-reactive stance with our nation's future and that of our women and our children, we the people as a whole, absent. Already, I don't know if you've known, but already the human collateral that comes along with the criminals, sexual deviants, and God knows who's entering this country through our unsecured borders has taken another life. Another woman murdered at the hands of an illegal alien who was released by U.S. authorities with a notice to appear. Another life lost that the media seems to deem non-essential. Today, all across this nation and here at this event, Americans who demand the blatant lawlessness of illegal immigration and the reward of amnesty for that lawlessness ends. It is a national day of protesting immigration reform, amnesty, and the border surge. Personally, this Louise is just so personal to me. I do not know why. I report on these crimes every week. Louise is a special case for me. Unexplainable, it just is. I will forever hold a special place in my heart for a woman I never met, but that has, for one reason or another, touched me so deeply. A woman whose life was violently and unnecessarily, due to the lawlessness, taken that could have been prevented. We must speak out. We must be heard. We must not be silent. We must speak for those who no longer can, for the many, many victims whose names are never spoken, like that of Louise Sollowin. To all of the victims, we will never forget, and you are not forgotten.
Thank you, Ruthie. Our next speaker, I think probably most of you have heard on the radio. He is on KFAB in the afternoons. I met this gentleman for the first time in April when we were both in Washington, D.C. at FAIR's annual national conference called Hold Their Feet to the Fire. They bring in 50 to 60 radio broadcasters from all across the country. They broadcast live from the hotel only on this issue. Now I have to tell you a little bit of a story about something that happened in D.C. that trip. The last night of the conference, there was a group of us that went out to get a bite to eat, and a couple of people had made mention of this restaurant that wasn't close to the hotel. If you know anything about DC, getting a taxi sometimes is not the easiest thing. Driving on your own is virtually out of the question because you're not going to get a parking place. So we pile in this taxi that is a van, and there's 5 of us. We go to the restaurant and we get done eating and we come back out and we start looking for a taxi. Well, one shows up spot on. But the taxi we had taken from the hotel to the restaurant was a van. And apparently in Washington, D.C., they have this rule that says regular taxis like we have around here, only 3 people can ride in them. So we've got 5 people, 2 of which are ladies. One is an older gentleman. And I kind of use that term loosely because I think we're about the same age. But we go ahead and let the ladies and this gentleman have the taxi. My next guest looks at me and says, well, tells everybody, we'll get it, we'll take the next cab. Well, after they get in and they take off and they're on the way back to the hotel, he looks at me and he says, we're just going to walk. We're not that far from the hotel. I know right where we are. So we begin walking, and we've gone 5 or 6 blocks, and I'm thinking, okay, my internal GPS tells me, you know, we probably have maybe a couple blocks left. And so we walk for a couple more blocks, and I look at him, I say, are you sure you know where we're going? He said, yeah, I got this. So we walk a couple more blocks, and we come to this stoplight, and there's people all around, cars going by like crazy. We still haven't seen a taxi, and this guy starts going, and I knew we were in trouble. He turns back and looks at me and says, we're going to get a taxi. His name is Chris Baker. I feel privileged in the fact that I have Mr. Baker's personal cell number. I know what his voicemail says because I almost never get a hold of him personally. It's always his voicemail. But his voicemail is this. Hi, you've reached Chris Baker. I'm not available right now because I'm out on a never-ending battle to stamp out communism and terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Baker.
Thanks, Bill, for running me in the mud. Appreciate that. That was quite an evening in Washington, D.C. I thought I knew where we were going, but we walked and then we got a cab, and we weren't even close. So Washington, D.C. was an eye-opener for me when I was there with Bill, because during the show, we were talking about immigration, and something came up, and I remember I said, you know, I remember talking about this years ago, and it stopped me dead in my tracks. And I believe that all of us have what I call a moment of clarity in our life. Every once in a while, one of these things pops up, and suddenly everything comes into perspective, and it can be a moment that will just stop you in your tracks, and it did me. And at that moment, I realized that I had been talking about this issue on the radio for 20 years, and nothing has changed. Nothing changed, except people have become more and more frustrated. And after that moment of clarity, I went back later that night and I started thinking about it, and I realized that we've never really even had an honest debate about illegal immigration. We've never had an honest debate, because those who are advocates for the illegals will never debate. They won't talk. All they'll do is give you rhetoric, and they'll tell you stories of this person suffered, and don't you care about the children? And we do care about the children, and we care about our country. And the one thing, or one of many things, that they will never admit is that what these people who come here flee is corrupt government, criminal classes that exploit their people. And what they don't want to talk about is the fact that the way that they're going about this sets up the exact same thing here. A country cannot be a prosperous country without a rule of law. You know that. That's why you're here today. And for 20 years, they've avoided that discussion and that debate. Over the last week or so, as we were notified that we were going to be receiving some young guests from south of the border, I began to engage all those advocates that would come on my radio program. And it is now on display for all to see. They have nothing but rhetoric. They have nothing but emotional cases to make. This has been a dishonest debate. I've watched this. I've watched the human rights. I've watched the exploitation of children that come across the border. For those of you that don't know, I'm from Texas. For over 25 years, I've been close to this issue. I've been on the raids at the smuggling houses. I've seen 12-year-old girls who've been forced into prostitution. When these people tell you that they care about human rights and they're so worried about what's best for these people, they lie. They're lying right to your face. And let me tell you what this agenda is. I figured it out. What they're trying to do, when it comes to the Democrats, when it comes to those hardcore leftists and their new allies in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, what they're trying to do, they're trying to change the culture of the United States of America. They're trying to import a class of people that are more easy to manage. That's what this is about. This has never been about human rights. If it was about human rights, we'd be enforcing the law. If it was about human rights, we would be asking Mexico, why are we giving you $1.9 billion to help with security, and apparently 6-year-old kids are able to zoom right through that country? That's not security, and we're certainly not getting our money's worth. I'd like to know why we're not asking Mexico that, because it's never been an honest debate. Why are we not talking to Mexico? Why aren't our elected representatives asking Mexico, where did our $1.9 billion go? The country of Mexico and these South American countries these people flee are countries full of wonderful and beautiful people, hardworking people who want nothing different than what you and I want. The difference is they're victims of corrupt governments. Brute force, money, and hot chicks runs the world. They are victims of brute force and money. And those who oppress them with their brute force and money steal their daughters if they're hot chicks. I know that may sound a little harsh, but it's true. Now, I would like to know why our elected representatives are not asking Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador and all these nations south of the border that have taken U.S. aid for decades, what are we getting for our money? And when are you going to start paying us back? I would like to know what's going to happen with Sergeant Andrew Tamarisi. And I would like to know why we don't see the passion coming out of Washington for him and his family that we see for these illegal immigrants that they're flooding into our country. Now, I have a solution for Sergeant Andrew Tamarisi. I have a solution. I know Mexico. I grew up near Mexico. I've spent an enormous time in Mexico. Take a suitcase full of money and go get that guy back. Okay, and stop puffing your chest out and going down. We're having very serious negotiations. We've made them aware of our displeasure. Bull crap. Here's how it works there. I know. I've seen it. I've done it. Take a suitcase full of money down there and find out which one of those fat goons is in charge. Give him the money, and you'll walk out of there with that Marine. I don't think we can trade him, because they would say that's not going to be enough. Anyway, I want to say this, and there's a lot of people to speak today. I get so fired up over this. But people are not racist when they ask for the laws to be enforced. We are not bigoted when we ask, are the children that are coming into our schools disease-free? We are not hateful when we ask, do you know if they're members of criminal gangs? All of these issues, all of those issues are fact-based. The left will not debate it with you. The left will only say, you're a hater. You don't care. That's their dishonesty. And that's how they do it. They follow a rule. They follow a strategy. Never debate. Never engage your opposition. Attack, attack, attack. Well, we now attack back. We will not allow them to define us, and we will no longer allow them to define this issue. They don't have the honesty, and they don't have the evidence to back it up. So God bless you. It's so great to see each and every one of you out here. Believe me, for every one of you that are out here, there are 1,000 more who believe the same thing you believe. So don't let anyone tell you that people don't care, because they do. I hear from them every single day, and it's a great honor to be able to talk to them and you on the radio. And this isn't radio business. This is Chris Baker, husband, father business right here. This is our country. We have a great country. We make the playbook for the world for prosperity and success, and we need to stand behind it. Thank you.
How's everybody holding up? Colonel Al, do you want to say something? You aren't on the list, but I'd be more than happy to let you come up here and... Are you sure? Stand up and say hi to everybody. Colonel Al Ringenberg, who's one of our city councilmen here in Council Bluffs, carrying on the fight. About 2.5 months ago, when I started planning this, boy, if I could go back, I don't know if I would have. This has been, up until about 10 days ago, everything that went into planning this has been on these shoulders. And there are people who have stepped up and helped me tremendously that I want to recognize right now. One of them is Jeff Jorgensen. Is Jeff still here? Thank you, sir. This man is a true patriot. This is the co-chair of the Potawatomi County Republican Party Central Committee. He and I have spent many hours in trucks driving here and there and talking about the problems that we have in this country. And he's a true patriot. He's a former Marine. Well, once a Marine, always a Marine. Jan Tatum. Is Jan still here? Jan Tatum is the other co-chair for Potawatomi County Central Committee. Big help. This is her canopy that you speakers have been sitting under, so thank her whenever you get a chance. Marianne Hanissa and Charlie Johnson, who were here earlier, if you'll remember, Marianne was one of the first speakers. They provided the water. If any of you guys are getting thirsty, please come down and get some. Who am I leaving out? Myra Nixon, wherever Myra's at, up there at the top. Myra, I can't thank you enough. I owe you big time. Michael Thompson isn't here right now. He's out running service calls for his heating and air conditioning business. He was here this morning, help us set up the sound and everything. John is still here. Stand up, John. Stand up, John. I just wanted to see how old you were, if you could still... He was here helping get everything ready this morning. My youngest son, Jacob, back here with the sunglasses on. Boy, transporting chairs from church, helping get the canopy and everything set up. I owe the biggest thanks probably to a woman that I have known for over 30 years. In the last 2.5 months, I can't count the number of times that she's looked at me and I've had this in my ear, or I've been on the computer trying to make arrangements. I have spoke with Congressman King's scheduler, his communications director, a number of times, even before this event. And her name is Sarah Wells. I want to thank Sarah. I wouldn't have that job for anything. The amount of preparation that goes into something like this is just unbelievable. We have, gosh, I don't know, 12 speakers here today, somewhere in that neighborhood. There were several others that were invited, and I've been talking with their both congressmen, representatives, senators, talking with their schedulers and their staff people, and just trying to get something like this coordinated. I told people this week that this is we're hoping to make this an annual event, with this being the first annual. And I told them initially that I was going to start planning for next year's event tomorrow, but I'm not going to. I'm going to take the day off, and I think I'll probably start Monday. But I want to thank my wife, Teresa, for putting up with me trying to get this done. Our next speaker is a gentleman who is with Tea Party Patriots. This man has been, for the last 2 months, on our southern borders, filming a documentary so that more people can become aware of just exactly how serious this problem is and how this problem affects our country.
We'd like to have Mills County come down and talk about it down there.
Sir, can we have that after the event? Thank you. His name is Greg Cummings. I've known him for quite a while now. We've met at a number of different events. And one thing that rings true here, we have a lot of true patriots at this event. A lot of people who are Americans to their very core and who are saddened, frustrated, and angry about what our government has turned this country into. Greg?
Good afternoon, everybody. Over 2,000 miles, 3 states of the border. We spent a lot of time talking to the United States citizens that owns the property that the border runs on top of, those ranchers and the sheriffs that defend those borders. We all know that there's a lady in the harbor, right, in New York City, that says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." That is an invitation to this globe, to the world, for all those that are experiencing tyranny to come to America. But it's an invitation to come to a government, come to a republic that's already established, that will protect each individual American citizen. That's what that invitation's for. That invitation is not to bring to the United States of America, to exploit our resources, to come and try to enforce your ideologies and your government expectations on this land. That's not what it's about. This situation with the open borders is 100% a humanitarian situation, because anything that tears down the Constitution of the United States becomes a humanitarian situation. Am I right? Well, there are solutions, and we all hear about the solutions, and I'm going to end with this little bit of segment right here with the actual solution. We hear that we need to build that fence all the way across, which is true. That fence needs to be completed, because the fence does become an obstacle for anybody wanting to come into our nation. Okay? And we're going to lean on Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution of the United States that prevents invasion, which our federal government has that responsibility to uphold. So that fence needs to be there. But we can't build that fence. And for the naysayers that says, yeah, but if you build a 50-foot fence and put a moat, as the president mocked, that's not going to stop them. Well, of course it's not going to stop them by itself. That's why the second part of the solution needs to happen, and that's boots on the ground. Right? So our president of the United States says, okay, so we double the amount of border patrol. The problem is that the border patrol stations are anywhere from 5, 20, 60 to 100 miles inland of the United States. And the label
is Border Patrol. They're neither on the border nor are they patrolling it. There's a big problem. So that brings the third part, and that's the technology. Yes, we need the cameras and we need the drones and everything else that we can put there with our technology to be able to assist those that are patrolling the border and keeping people from negotiating the fence, right? That will work. The problem is that the cameras that they're putting on the border right now are being placed where a long sight can be seen. But with the deep gullies and the deep valleys where the cameras can't see, that's where they're coming in. So guess what our government does? Our government says, now wait a minute, this fence is causing some environmental problems because when it rains, it's flushing this debris up against the fence, and that's bad for the wildlife. So guess what the genius is of our government does? In these gullies, where patrols aren't being done and cameras can't see, the wisdom of our government comes and puts in what I call garage doors, literally within the fence that's built there, so that, and they lift it up and they leave it up for 3 months out of the year in the rainy season of the desert. It's absolutely crazy. Well, here's the solution that will make all of those phases work. The reason why we have a border problem is because of you. Yeah, I said you, the American citizen, each individual. We have a problem because we are not engaged. It's because of me. We have to be engaged in our government. We have to go and vote. We have to talk face to face with our congressman, with our senator, and ask them, why are these things happening? Why is the Border Patrol 90 miles off the border? We, the people, are the authority of this republic, right? The reason why the government grows is because we, the people, forgot to be engaged in that government, forgot about our authority. You, yourself, your vote matters. Your single voice matters. Because the motto of this country is E pluribus unum. From the many, one. You don't become one voice unless the many get engaged. We need to do that, please. Talk yourself into it. Get that intestinal fortitude, that self-discipline to do it. Get your family members to do it. Get your neighbors to do it. Get your mayor, your city councils, everybody to write those letters. Let them know what your problems are. Melt down those phone lines. Guess what will happen? They will start paying attention. Okay? So the border situation is horrible, very porous. The drug cartel absolutely owns the southern end of that border all the way across Mexico. They dictate the government what to do. The drug cartel. The drug cartel owns and controls the United States side of that border. They are in control. They intimidate. They send pictures and they send videos to those that own property, the ranchers, the sheriff's offices, of people being murdered to intimidate them. You keep your fences open. Here's a present. How many of you take your family to the grocery store, and when you return home, you have to tell your wife and your children, stay in the car, so that you can go into your home and clear it to make sure it's safe, and then come out, okay, it's okay, come on in, on a daily basis. Not because they heard of something in the area. This is the condition of the borders of the United States of America, and you are not hearing that from the media. Hopefully you will see more of this on our documentary. We don't even have the title yet, but once it's done, we are pushing it out in all 50 states to all of our membership, Tea Party Patriots. And if you go on teapartypatriots.org and keep watching for it, it should be out in September. But there's a call to action, and I'll end with this.
There is a lineage all the way back to our first soldiers who wore that tri-corner hat right there, that died for a republic where we the people are in charge. Your call to action is don't turn your back on those that have fallen and that are being brought home from Afghanistan and Iraq tomorrow. Don't turn your back on them. Don't turn your back on your republic. Take your individual authority back and get engaged. With that, Charlie and Mike continue the mission. Thank you.
Everybody having fun? Oh, that was pretty weak. Not everybody's having fun. When I started planning this, I had a couple of people ask me, well, Bill, do you have a backup venue? No. What are you going to do? I said, pray. Do we have a faithful and grateful, gracious Heavenly Father that's provided this beautiful day for us? Not too hot. Nice little breeze blowing. My son earlier this morning says, man, I sure hope that wind quits blowing. I said, son, you crazy. We need that wind to keep blowing. My next guest is from the northwest corner of this state. I first met him, last fall, I think, sometime. And I have since talked with him on the phone a number of times. This man has more wisdom than most of the men I know, and I know some pretty wise guys. He first attempted to win a place to try and take Tom Harkin's seat and was not successful in that, much to, I'm sure, not only my chagrin, but his as well as thousands of other people that were supporting him. He's now running for the state treasurer of Iowa. And I don't want to take any of his thunder. I've heard his speech so many times I could probably just about give it to you, but I'm not going to. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sam Clovis.
I won't be long. It's warm and the wind is blowing and you all are going to be terribly sunburned by the time this is all over, as I am already. And I've got to be on the road here pretty quick to another event up in the north central part of the state, so Iowa's a big place. I'm here to, everything is, we've talked about the rule of law a great deal, and we've talked about the fact that we have a lawless administration that doesn't seem to be able to enforce the laws of this land, and that's a tragedy in and of itself, because we, the people, depend on our government to protect us and secure this for us. I saw a sign here behind me, and this is kind of the thing I wanted to talk about today, and again, as I said, I'll be brief. I very much want to talk to you about national sovereignty, the sovereignty of a nation and what that means. Well, I'm a political scientist, and so when it comes to understanding these things, I can get pretty academic and drill down pretty far and get into all the esoteric aspects of this and what it means. But what it really means is that unless you have a secure border, unless you have a solvent currency, unless you have the right of suffrage for all people, unless you have individual liberty, you actually do not have national sovereignty. And all of those things are under assault by this administration. National sovereignty is how we identify ourselves as American. We see the flags that fly here in this park and fly all over this country, and those are the flags that represent to us that symbol of national identity and national sovereignty. If you look in the Constitution of the United States under Article 2, it says in there what the oath of office is for the President of the United States. And I think what is startling there is the fact that we look at this and it says that I will support and defend to the best of my ability
the Constitution of the United States. And I've often said, even when I had a radio program myself and other things, that I don't think that this president has very much ability, or he'd be doing more. So to the best of his ability, he is not supporting and defending this Constitution at all. Because as this is an intentional, deliberate act, it is a cynical act to bring into this country millions and millions of people who become part of a permanent underclass, have no chance for upward mobility economically, have no voice for us in any way, shape, or form. And what we end up having is a very cynical view to cast votes for a particular party and a particular political philosophy that will enslave the people of this country forever. I wore a uniform for this nation for 29 years. And in that time that I wore that uniform, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And I'd hate to think that those 29 years were for nothing. My son is a member of the armed forces. My daughter-in-law, a member of the armed forces. My brother and my father were veterans. My family has served this nation for as many generations as I can certainly account for. And all of us, as we've heard today, all of us come from immigrant families. So this isn't about immigration. This is about American identity. This is about American ideals. This is about American values. This isn't about race. This isn't about bigotry. This isn't about any of those things. It is about being American. And when you come here, anybody in the world can go to Japan and you'll never become Japanese. You can go to Germany and you'll never be German. You can go to Canada and you'll never really be Canadian. Anyone can come here and be American. That's what we really need to get across in this whole issue. If you want to come here, come legally, become part of this great culture, assimilate, do the things that are necessary to become great citizens and participants in this nation. And that means to come here to vote, to live, to become part of our economy, and frankly, and for many, to support and defend this Constitution, because that's the oath that they take when they get there. I want to say one thing. Look at the crowd here today. There may be thousands more that believe this way, but where are they? You have to do the missionary work to go out here. You must be courageous. You must be willing to stand up for this. And I hearken back to the notion of Paul and John the Baptist, those great people who had great courage and stood there and paid the ultimate price for something they believed in. So if you believe in this, you must go out and do the missionary work that all of us have been trying to do ourselves. You must become the missionaries. You must save the Americans. You must convert them. You must do that. It doesn't come easy, and it is a hard thing to do. But you must have the courage to do it. Look around you. Look around all of these people here. Ask yourselves, what have you done? What have you done to bring more people into the fold? What have you done to go out and knock on doors to get people elected that will support and defend this Constitution? What have you done? I had a radio program up in Sioux City for many years, and one of the things I started up there was I'm an old movie buff, and I was watching the movie The Untouchables. And there's a great scene in there when Sean Connery and Kevin Costner are in the cathedral, and they're on their knees and they're praying, and Costner, who is Elliot Ness, he says, "I'm frustrated, I can't figure out what it is, I can't seem to get at Al Capone." And Sean Connery, playing the role of the old Irish cop, says, "What are you willing to do? What are you willing to do?" And the line that came to me is said by Sean Connery later in the movie, is you must be able to do one more thing. That one more thing may be more than putting a sign in your yard. It may be more than writing a check. It may be more than knocking on doors. It may be more than going to your church or your school or your community center and talking about these issues. It may be more than showing up at a rally. But you must always remember, you must do one more thing. Thanks for having me here today. I hope to see all of you again very soon.